My name is Sienna Brooks, and at 32 I have a life I built with tired hands and a stubborn heart. I live in Orlando, Florida, in a small modern apartment with a view that catches the evening light. I am a data analyst at a fast-moving tech company. Some days the numbers sing for me. Some days they argue either way. They do not lie, and after the childhood I had, I learned to love anything that tells the truth. I was 9 when my mother, Marissa Hale, packed a suitcase in a quiet kitchen and walked out on me and my father, Jacob Brooks. I remember how the clock over the fridge ticked, and how the cold air hit my legs when the door opened. She did not look back. Later I would hear the grown-up words for what happened: divorce, custody, new start. What I felt at 9 was simpler: empty chair, cold plate, no more lullabies. Dad ran a little diner in our Ohio town. Grazy Spoon neon sign, the kind of place where coffee pours all day and the floor knows every boot print. He worked from first light until long after dark, flipping pancakes, scraping the grill, counting singles at midnight. He smelled like onions and soap, and his hands were always warm and rough when he squeezed my shoulder and said, "You are stronger than this, kiddo." We were poor in the plain way that keeps a person awake. Rent late. Fridge light shining on half a jar of pickles. I watched Dad make the hard calls, the ones that end with apologies and quiet promises. He tried to shield me, but a child knows the weight of worry. I saw it in his shoulders when he thought I was not looking. I started working when I was 13, babysitting, cleaning houses, shelving boxes at the corner store, tossing newspapers to porches while the morning was still blue. I handed my earnings to Dad, and told him it made me feel grown. He told me I deserved to be a kid. We met in the middle. I kept helping and he kept pretending that I was not. School became the place where I felt steady. Numbers gave me peace. Algebra, then calculus, then any problem that let me put chaos into neat rows. I stayed late for math club. I did homework at the diner counter while Dad refilled mugs and told me I could be anything. At home, when silence pressed on us, he would say, "You and me, we can make a life out of almost nothing." By 17 I knew my way out would be education. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I wrote my story so many times that the words rubbed the ache smooth. A full ride came through for data analytics at a state university. Tuition covered. The rest was on me: books, rent, food. The numbers did not care about my feelings, so I matched them with a work schedule that would make most adults wince. I waited tables at a campus diner and taped code snippets to the inside of my order pad so I could memorize them on slow nights. I filed paperwork at a tiny law office on weekends. I cleaned offices after midnight until my arms shook. I set 3 alarms and still woke up ahead of them. I lived on lists and leftovers. When I felt myself slipping, I took out one of Mom's birthday cards. They arrived every year flat and tidy. "Happy birthday. Hope you are well." No call, no visit. The cards did not love me back, but they reminded me why I was moving forward. The day I graduated, Dad stood in the sun in his only suit, eyes wet, hands shaking as if he had carried me across a finish line he could not see. I landed an entry-level analyst role in Orlando. I said goodbye to the town where our hard years lived, and drove south with a car full of second-hand furniture, and a heart that was nervous and brave at the same time. Orlando felt bright and busy. The tech scene buzzed. I started small, cleaned datasets until they gleamed, wrote tidy queries, stayed late, asked questions, learned where the landmines sit in a spreadsheet and how to find the stories inside a mess. Promotions came one at a time. 5 years in, I was leading projects and earning a salary that would have felt like a fairy tale to the girl who used to count quarters at a laundromat table. With my paychecks came a promise I had made to myself. I sent Dad $500 a month at first, then more when I could. He called it a loan and tried to keep a ledger. I told him it was gratitude and cut up the ledger. I helped him fix the leaking roof at the diner. I paid for a new fridge when the old one died with a long, dramatic sigh. He told me not to worry about him. I told him he had worried enough for both of us. Every time we talked, he told me he was proud in a voice that made me feel taller. The cards from Mom still came, same tidy script, same nothing inside them. I tucked them into a drawer I did not open often. I built a home in Orlando, plants on the windowsill, a couch that did not wobble, a kitchen with clean lines and a table big enough for friends. I found good people at work and in my building. Cara from marketing, who knew every cafe in the city and never forgot a birthday. Nina from operations, who could organize anything, even a human heart. Ryan, who lived down the hall and knocked whenever he cooked too much pasta. They became my chosen family. We ate on my floor when there were no chairs yet. We watched thunderstorms roll in. We built rituals, the kind that turn a place into a life. I thought the past was quiet now. Then one autumn evening, a firm knock drew me to my door. I opened it and stared into a face shaped like mine, older, careful, rehearsed. "Marissa." My mother, standing beside her, was a young man who looked like the photos I had stalked online during weak moments. My half-brother, Cole Hale. He was tall, pretty in a way that had never worked as hard as it should, eyes on his phone, mouth curved like he was already bored. Sienna, my sweet girl, it has been too long, Marissa said as she stepped in for a hug. I did not lift my arms. She hugged the air and pretended not to notice. We sat in my living room, and I watched her eyes move over my furniture, my framed photos, the skyline. She made small talk for 2 minutes, then her voice thinned and sharpened. I heard you have a good job, big projects, good money. She smiled like we were sharing a secret. Cole starts college soon. Tuition is $60,000. We need your help. Just a little. Maybe $3,000 a month. The numbers were large. The entitlement was larger. Cole finally looked up and glanced around as if he were touring a model home that missed the mark. Nice place, he said. Small though. For someone making bank. He stretched out on my couch and put his shoes on my table, as if he were testing how far he could go. You could do better. I asked how they found me. Marissa waved the question away and said she had friends. She called it family when she asked for my money. I felt the word hit my chest like a stone dropped in a pond. Family helps family, she said. I remembered my father bleeding for me at a griddle that never cooled and my mother writing 1 sentence a year. I told him I would need time to think. Marissa's smile tightened. Cole muttered that I was stingy. They left with promises to call. When the door closed, I stood in my quiet apartment and tried to settle my breath. I felt shock, anger, and something softer that scared me more. Hope. I hated that it was still in me, small and stubborn. The next morning Marissa texted. We set a time to meet at a busy cafe near Lake Eula. The room hummed with conversations and plates. I spotted them in a corner. Marissa wore a soft cardigan that said she wanted to look safe. Cole wore the kind of smirk that says rules are for other people. Marissa reached for my hand. I let mine stay in my lap. She started with a story where she was the one left out in the cold. Your father kept you from me, she said. He made it impossible. I tried. I did not argue, I listened. And while I listened, I remembered the way Dad had left the porch light on every night for a year, and the way he looked at the phone like it might explain itself. Cole cut in and asked for a car to get to class. Something nice like a Mustang. His phone, he added, was trash and needed replacing. He said it the way a person orders dessert, confident and amused. I asked if they were serious. He rolled his eyes and said I was loaded. Marissa said again that family shares. I told them I worked for what I have. I told them that Dad and I scraped and saved, that I was not a bank. Marissa's face hardened. She told me I was ungrateful. Cole said his stepfather had warned him I would be like this. The cafe quieted. I stood and told them I was done. Marissa grabbed my arm and said I would regret it. I walked away and did not look back. I went home and tried to work. I tried to let it pass through me. I could not. That afternoon the buzzer sounded. Marissa and Cole stood at my door again. Marissa spoke with a sweetness that felt sticky. We just want to talk. I let them in because I did not want a scene in the hall. Cole went straight to my desk. When I turned from the sink with 3 glasses of water, he was at my laptop. My banking app glowed on the screen like a flare. What are you doing? I asked. Just looking, he said. He did not move. Marissa stepped closer and said there was no need to hide. She said I had so much. She said this like it was a compliment and a threat. I took the laptop and saw a trail I would have noticed even if I were not trained to notice. My dashboard open, a password reset page waiting. 2 failed login attempts. My pulse went loud in my ears. I opened my email and saw a forwarded message that did not come from me. It came from my father's account. It held a copy of a company newsletter that had featured my promotion months ago, and a note I had sent my dad with my salary number, because he was proud and wanted to understand it. The message had been forwarded to Marissa's address. I felt my mouth go dry. You hacked Dad's email, I said. You used his trust to crawl through my life. Her face lost its color, then darkened. She said Dad had always been a failure who dragged us down. She said she needed to know how I turned out so well. Cole snorted and said Dad was a loser. He called him Jacob. Like he was a man he had never met and had decided he did not like. Something steady rose in me. Get out, I said. Or I will call the police. You would call the police on your mother, Marissa said. She sounded hurt, but her eyes challenged me. You broke into Dad's email, I said. You tried to get into my accounts. That is enough. I lifted my phone. I did not make a show of it. I just held it like a tool. Marissa pulled Cole toward the door. She said we were not done. They left. I locked the door and sat at the table until my breathing slowed. Then I did what numbers taught me to do. I followed the facts. I checked logs. I printed screenshots. I turned on every security feature my bank and my life offered. I called Dad. When he answered, he sounded both surprised and not at all surprised. Someone had changed his password weeks ago. He had thought he forgot it. He had not. "I am sorry," he said. "I should have protected you better." "You protected me my whole life," I told him. "This is not on you." I called an attorney the next morning. Adrian Walsh came, recommended by a colleague who never wastes words. He listened while I laid out my evidence. He did not rush me. He did not ask why I let them in. He said what happened was serious. He said it plain: unauthorized access, harassment, threat of financial harm. He explained the process: paperwork, affidavits, a hearing. We filed for a restraining order. We told the court what Marissa and Cole had done and tried to do. I brought screenshots and timelines and the truth. The hearing was short and formal and felt like a strange play I had wandered into. The judge read. The judge listened. The judge granted the order. Permanent. No contact. No visits. Stay away from my home and my work. The papers felt thin in my hands and heavy in my chest. Days later, my phone buzzed with a bank alert. An attempt to transfer $10,000 from my savings had triggered two-factor authentication and locked the action. I stood at my window and watched a storm move in across the city. I felt a wash of relief for the block, and a new kind of sadness that was deeper than anger. It is a strange thing to see that a person you wanted to love wants your life more than your presence. Adrian filed a follow-up with the court. He told me to keep every notice and log every call attempt, even the ones that never connected. He told me my careful records were protecting me. I believed him because careful records had always protected me. Time moved, seasons changed. The story of what Marissa did traveled through her side of the family the way these stories do, with whispers that got louder and then quiet acceptance when the pattern proved itself again. Aunt Ruth, her older sister, called me one evening. Her voice sounded tired in the way that comes from holding your breath for years. She told me that Marissa had always loved new beginnings more than she loved finishing anything. She told me about money never paid back and promises that ended when they were no longer convenient. She said it kindly, not to wound me, only to show me where the road had always led. Marissa and Cole moved to a smaller town. Friends faded, relatives stopped answering. The circle shrank until there was almost nothing left. I did not celebrate it. Consequences have a quiet sound. They do not taste sweet. They simply arrive. I started therapy because even a person who loves data cannot out-logic the achy of being left. Alora Vance had a calm presence, and a way of waiting that drew out the words I had hidden from myself. She told me I had carried my mother's choices like a backpack full of rocks. She said I could set it down without throwing it. She said I could leave it by the road and keep walking. In our sessions, I learned to stop measuring my worth against a door that had closed years ago. I learned to let love in with less fear that it would vanish when I needed it. Healing did not look like a sunrise. It looked like sleeping through the night without waking to check locks. It looked like calling Dad on Tuesday for no reason. It looked like laughing with Kara until my stomach hurt over nothing more than a ruined cake. It looked like trusting that if I cried on Nina's couch, she would not be tired of me in the morning. It looked like knocking on Ryan's door with 2 bowls, when the smell of tomato sauce sneaked down the hall. I wanted to pass the good forward. I set up a small fund for kids like I had been, steady students with thin wallets. I called it the First Light Fund, because the morning paper route had taught me something about moving through darkness. Kara helped me shape the outreach and wrote copy that made people feel seen. Nina built the application process so it stayed fair and simple. Ryan passed flyers through his community network. A colleague named Nahid designed a clean website where applicants could tell their story without shame. We offered tiny scholarships, the kind that pay for books and bus passes and the gap between rent and relief. I read the letters and saw my younger self in their lines. It felt like putting a hand on a smaller shoulder and saying, "You are not alone." I kept my boundaries clean. The restraining order stayed in place. The log stayed in a folder. The bank alerts came less often and then stopped. Some days I thought about Marissa in that smaller town, about Cole, about whether he would learn that easy things cost more than they promise. I wished him better teachers than he had at home. One year after the cafe, I sat with Dad at the diner during a slow afternoon. We ate fries at the counter like movie detectives. He asked if I was happy. I told him I was not always happy, but I was steady. He said steady was a kind of happiness. He told me the roof had stopped leaking. He told me the coffee tasted better with new filters. He told me I was the best thing he ever made in that kitchen, better than any pancake. I went home that night and looked through the drawer where I kept Marissa's cards. I read each one, not to hurt myself, but to mark a line. I put them back and closed the drawer. I did not throw them away. They were part of my story, but they did not get the last page. I thought my peace would stay quiet. I thought the part of the story where danger lives was over. Then, one evening in late October, I came home to find my door slightly open. The lock was not broken. The wood was not splintered. The door was simply not latched all the way, as if I had rushed in the morning and forgot. My heart climbed into my throat. I stepped back into the hall and called the building manager, then the police. We walked through together. Nothing was taken. Nothing was out of place, only one thing had changed. The drawer with the birthday cards was open. I stood in that small room and felt the air shift. The restraining order was still in force. The deadbolt had been locked when I left. The sliding chain could be slipped from the outside with a cheap tool, if you knew what you were doing. I knew this because I had Googled it the day I filed for the order and then wished I had not. The officer made notes and told me to add a second lock. The manager promised to change the hardware. I spent the night at Nina's place. We ate cereal and watched a silly show and kept the lamp on. The next morning I went to my office early and drowned myself in work. At lunch, a bank alert pinged. Not a transfer. A login from a new device that failed, then stopped. The two-factor guard had done its job. The attempt matched neither my phone nor my laptop. The city felt smaller. The air felt thinner. I called Adrian and sent him the screenshots. He told me I'd done everything right. He told me to hold steady. I did my best. That evening I took a different route home. I watched my own windows from the street. I went inside and checked everything again, locks, drawers, under the bed, even though I knew it was silly. I made tea. I sat on the floor. I told myself out loud that I was safe in my own home. The kettle clicked as if it agreed. I did not hear from Marissa. The order had teeth and she knew it. Still, she did not need to knock to make her presence felt. People who live on the edge of other people's boundaries learn how to breathe through the cracks. I called Dr. Vance and booked an extra session. We talked about fear and control, and the little tricks that calm the nervous system, when it wants to sprint out of your chest. She said grief comes back when it wants to, not when you invite it. She said courage is not a roar. Sometimes it is just a person sitting still in their own living room. 2 weeks later, during a rain that fell in straight lines, Aunt Ruth called again. She told me Marissa and Cole had argued in public at a grocery store. She told me Cole had walked out with a bag he did not pay for and had been stopped at the door. She told me he had looked shocked, as if consequences were a foreign language. She said she was sorry to tell me. I told her I was not surprised. I told her I was sorry too. We both were quiet for a while, listening to our separate reigns. Work stayed bright. The First Light Fund funded 6 more students. One of them wrote to say the bus pass meant she could stop missing morning classes when her ride fell through. Another wrote to say he bought a used laptop with the stipend and could now code at the library without watching the clock. Small victories, big impact. They steadied me. On a Sunday in November, Dad arrived with an overnight bag. He said he wanted to see me and also my locks. We replaced the chain with a bar that clicks in place with a sound that feels like security. He taught me the trick for wedging a chair under a knob, even though the new bar made it unnecessary. We made chili. We watched a game. He fell asleep in the chair, mouth open, hands folded like a man who had finally put his worry down for one night. I took a picture and sent it to myself so I would not forget the kind of peace that looks ordinary. The next morning, a letter arrived. Not a card, not a text. A letter in Marissa's tidy hand. It was short. She said she regretted nothing and everything at the same time. She said she had done what she had to do. She asked if I could find it in my heart to send money for Cole's legal trouble. She used the word family again, as if it were a key she could insert into any locked door. I held the paper until my fingers warmed it. Then I put it in the same drawer with the cards. I did not answer. People like to say closure is a door that clicks shut. I think closure is a window that you open. You let air in. You let the room be what it is. You breathe again. One night I took a walk around the lake. The swans tucked their heads under their wings. The water caught the city lights and shattered them into 1,000 pieces that still looked like a whole. Ryan joined me with hot chocolate. He asked about the fund. He asked about my newest project at work. He did not ask about Marissa, which was the kindest thing he could have done. We talked about nothing for a long time. It felt like everything at home. I sat at my table and wrote a list of what I knew for sure. I like lists. They make the world manageable. I wrote that I am not responsible for the choices adults made when I was a child. I wrote that love is a practice, not a word. I wrote that people can show up late, but they cannot demand the seat at the head of the table. I wrote that my father's hands told the truth about love in a way no card ever did. I wrote that my life belongs to me and to the people who choose me. I wish I could tell you this was the end of my mother's attempts to pull at the edges of what I have built. It was not. but the story stopped being about what she took and started being about what I chose. When the next test came, I was ready to stay steady, to protect my peace without hardening my heart. I would learn how to forgive without opening the door, how to release the past without losing the part of me that still believes people can do better. And when I finally learned what they had been hiding, when the last, sharp piece of their plan showed its face, I understood that the strongest thing I had ever done was also the simplest. I believed my own eyes. I trusted the math of my life. I chose the family who chose me back. The letter should have been the end. I wanted to file it away and let the silence grow over it. Instead, it became a thread. When I tugged, the whole fabric moved. Adrian called me 2 days after I sent him the new bank screenshots. His voice was steady, the way a person sounds when they have a map. I pulled records tied to the failed login. He said, "There is a pattern that overlaps with an address in New Crestwood, your mother's last known place. I also ran a check with the credit bureaus like you authorized. Sienna, there are 2 hard inquiries in your name from a private lender you never contacted." I felt that small drop inside, the one that turns your stomach cold and your thoughts hot. Loan applications. Yes. He short-term, predatory, they withdrew when the 2-factor blocked the bank link. The inquiries still show. How did they get my full SSN, I asked. Probably from something your father kept, he said. Old tax files. His email was a door, let's not guess. We will prove what we can prove. I thanked him and hung up. I called Dad. He was quiet while I explained, and then he said he would check the old file box in his hall closet. He found a copy of my high school tax form and a photocopy of my social security card, both no longer needed and both enough to do damage in the wrong hands. He apologized until I stopped him. "You saved me 1,000 times, I said. "This is not your fault." That night I opened the First Light Fund email and read 2 new letters from students. One wrote that she wanted to be an accountant because numbers felt fair. The other wrote that he wanted to repair phones to help his neighbors. I sat with their words until my breath found a normal rhythm again. Adrian moved fast. He brought on a forensic accountant he trusted, a woman named Alana with neat eyes and a habit of labeling every file with the date. She requested bank metadata and traced the failed attempts back to a public library terminal and a shared workspace in New Crestwood. Security footage showed Cole in a hoodie at a terminal, the glancing over his shoulder. The timestamps matched the alerts from my bank. Adrian filed a supplemental petition with the court. He requested a hearing to extend protection to include my financial accounts, and to compel the library and workspace to release logs. He also filed a police report for attempted identity theft. He kept me copied on everything. The paper trail felt like a wall we were building one brick at a time. The morning of the hearing I wore the same black dress I had worn when I first took my job in Orlando. It had seen 2 promotions and 1 hard season. I told myself it could see me through this too. Adrian met me at the courthouse with a folder. He had printed everything and placed bright tabs on the places where the judge would look first. Marissa did not appear. Cole came in late, shirt wrinkled, trying to look unimpressed and landing on uncertain. He sat on the far bench with a man who looked like a friend trying to be a bodyguard. When the judge called our case, Cole stared at the floor. Adrian laid out the facts. The hacked email, the failed logins, the predatory loan inquiries, the library footage, the letter using the word family as if it were a password. He was calm and clear. When the judge asked if Cole wished to speak, he shrugged and said someone else must have used the terminal after him. Adrian handed up the exact time stamps. The judge did not smile. No electronic contact. No attempts to access any account. No contact through third parties. Violations would trigger immediate consequences. I left the courtroom with my shoulders back and my jaw unclenched. I walked down the steps into the sunlight and called Dad. He said he was proud of me in the soft voice he uses when a thing is both hard and right. For a week, things were quiet. I added a second deadbolt and a peephole camera. I took a boxing class with Nina and learned how to plant my feet. I cooked with Ryan and learned how to let someone else season the sauce. I laughed with Kara over a failed cake that slumped in the middle and still tasted rich. I slept, not long, but long enough to remember what rest feels like. Then the next thread pulled loose. A collection notice arrived at Dad's diner. The envelope was addressed to Jacob Brooks, Deba Brooks Diner. The letter inside claimed a small business line of credit, had gone into default 4 years earlier, and demanded immediate payment, or they would place a lion on the property. Dad called me from the office while the lunch crowd clattered in the background. "I never opened a line like this," he said. "I would remember. The amount is too large for a vendor tab. The servicing bank is in New Crestwood." I asked him to read every line. He did. The original application date was 6 months after Marisa left years ago. then renewed with a logged phone call 4 years earlier when Cole would have been 18. A photocopy of the application sat inside the letter as proof. The signature said Jacob Brooks, but the J looked like a fancy fish hook. My father signs his J's like a carpenter, plain and straight. Fax it, I said, and lock your office. Adrian's office scanned the letter into the case file. Alana pulled the application that the lender had attached. She found a footnote referencing a driver's license scan used to verify identity during the renewal. The license number did not match my father's. The face in the blurry scan was Marissa, younger and sharper, holding the card like a woman who had long practiced presenting a version of herself. The renewer's phone call had been recorded per bank policy. We requested the audio. The voice giving consent was not my father's. Adrian and Alana sat with me in a conference room while we listened to the recording. The voice sounded like sunlight behind a cloud. Polite. Smiling, practiced. This is Jacob Brooks, the voice said. Yes, I authorize renewal. I shut my eyes. I had heard that voice my whole life, even when I had tried not to. Adrian paused the recording and then pressed play again. He looped the part where the caller fumbles a number, then corrects it with the right digits as if reading from a file. Alana had already pulled the call metadata. The number originated from a prepaid phone that had also called Cole's high school and a chain mechanic near New Crestwood, where Cole had bought tires once. Based on the loyalty program data Alana was able to request with my permission. When data lines up like that, you do not need a crystal ball. Adrian filed a fraud dispute on Dad's behalf, and then filed a police report for forgery and financial fraud, attaching the recording. He asked the court to fold the new information into my restraining orders so all three of us would be protected by the same set of orders and the same judge. The judge granted it. The lie and threat paused, then came the call that turned the tide. A detective named Rivera left a message asking me to return her call. When I did, she told me they had located the prepaid phone through a store receipt. The clerk remembered a woman buying 2 identical phones and paying cash. The description matched Marissa. Security footage caught the side of her face and the shape of her hand holding the box. It was enough. They served a warrant for the apartment in New Crestwood. The inventory list from the search included a folder with my father's old tax forms, including the copy of my social security card, and a spiral notebook with a list of my logins written like clues. Company newsletter, salary, try race at 2FA, ask Cole. There was also a typed letter to a private lender with my name, and a fake email address 1 letter off from mine. The word family appeared again. Rivera told me the rest without flourish. Cole was picked up on an unrelated shoplifting charge. He offered information in exchange for a softer recommendation. He said the fraud was not his idea. He said his mother had told him it was fine, because my father owed her from a life she did not want anymore. He said he only sat at the library, because she asked him to do the typing. When Rivera asked why he tried to move 10,000, he said he wanted breathing room. He said I would not feel it anyway. Adrian was careful with me. He told me I did not need to attend any more hearings unless I wished to. He told me justice moves slow but moves. He told me we would press for restitution, and for an outcome that made new harm less likely. The court dates came. Marissa's attorney argued that the evidence was circumstantial. The recording did not explicitly say her name. The driver's license scan was grainy. The notebook was hearsay. The judge listened, then asked about the prepaid phones, the overlapping numbers, the library footage, the failed logins, the attempt to pull money, the letter to me, and the line of credit that had hurt a small diner in a small town. Sometimes the weight of the pieces becomes a whole. Marissa kept her eyes on the table while they played the recording again. Cole looked at her, then at the door, as if the exit might open onto a different life. He testified as part of his deal. He described the way Marissa coached him to say certain phrases. He said she told him that if the world had been fair, she would not have had to start over, so she was only taking what she deserved. He did not cry, he did not apologize, he sounded tired, like someone who finally realized the ground is hard. The judge found sufficient evidence of fraud and identity theft attempts. The expanded protective order became a long-term order. Marissa was convicted on the forgery and fraud counts. Cole pled to attempted unauthorized access and a related charge. Sentencing came a month later. Here is where the poetic justice arrived. The judge ordered restitution not as a lump sum to me alone, but as 2 streams. The first stream went to my father to cover legal costs and the damage done by the fraudulent line of credit. The second stream went to a registered nonprofit named in the filing as the First Light Fund. The judge said on record that the harm began with a mother using a daughter's hard-earned name for leverage. If there was to be restitution, then it would help children who were making something honest out of hard beginnings. Adrian did not ask for this. The judge chose it. I looked down at my hands and felt the odd mix of ache and relief that comes when your pain is repurposed into help. Cole's community service hours were assigned to a local food pantry and a neighborhood kitchen, where volunteers prep breakfast before dawn. Twice a week, he had to stand at a grill and flip eggs, and listen to orders and wipe down counters. When I heard the details, I thought of Dad and his hands that always smelled like onions and soap. I do not believe the universe gives us neat lessons on demand, but sometimes the rhyme is clear. Marissa received a suspended sentence with strict probation and mandatory financial literacy and counseling. Any violation would activate the term. Her probation terms included a ban on opening any credit in any family member's name, and a requirement to attend a program for fraud offenders that ends with a talk to a local high school about the cost of shortcuts. I did not want to see that talk. I did not need the performance. I wanted the paper guardrails to stand, and they did. I saw Marissa once more, by accident. I had taken Dad to a small claims window to resolve an unrelated vendor dispute, and we were leaving the building when she turned the corner with her probation officer. She looked older. The careful grace was still there, just cracked. She paused as if to form a sentence. I did not stop. I met her eyes long enough to let her know I had seen her. It was not anger. It was recognition without invitation. She lowered her gaze first. I guided Dad forward and we stepped into the light. He squeezed my hand when we reached the curb. "You did right," he said. I told him we did right. Life did not turn magical, it turned manageable. The alerts stopped coming. The drawer stayed closed. The new deadbolt clicked each night. I still woke up sometimes, heart thudding, and walked the apartment in a quiet loop. Then I would make tea and sit by the window and remind myself of the facts. The order is active. The accounts are protected. The locks are solid. You are safe. My nervous system learned a new script. The first light fund grew. When the judge named it in the order, a local paper reached out. They wrote a short piece that did not pry, that focused on the students. Donations came in small bills and spare dollars. A retired teacher sent $50 with a note that said she believed in morning people. A barista left a jar with our flyer beside the tip cup. A former scholarship kid from another city emailed to offer mentoring. We added 3 more students. One of them chose data analytics. When I called to tell her, she cried and then laughed and then said she would not let me down. I told her the money was ours to give and hers to use. No guilt attached. Ryan helped me plant herbs on the balcony. Kara made a flyer for a small fundraiser at the diner, and added a photo of Dad in his apron where he looked like the captain of a tiny ship. Nina built a volunteer form that was simple enough to fill out on a phone while waiting for the bus. Nahid tweaked the site so the application loaded faster on old devices. We were not saving the world. We were making it less sharp at the edges for a few kids at a time. It felt like purpose that fit in 2 hands. The last loose thread showed itself in a neat, almost comical way. Cole enrolled at a community college after his sentencing, a condition of his plan to shift course. The financial aid office flagged his application, because he had tried to list me as a parent to increase his package, even though I am his half-sister and not his guardian. It was the kind of clumsy fraud that used to make me seethe. Now it made me tired. The aid officer, a woman with firm kindness in her tone, told him it would not work and sent him to a workshop on budgeting instead. He completed it. He submitted a corrected form. He qualified for a small grant and work study, the way many kids do. I do not know if he will use it well. I hope he does. I hope he learns that honest money spends better. I thought for a long time about forgiveness. People push the word like a cure and I do not blame them. It is tempting to think one choice can wash you clean. Dr. Vance helped me find a version I could live with. I do not wish harm on Marissa or Cole. I do not want them near my life. I want them to have enough distance to do no damage. If they ever change, that will be their work, not mine. My work is to keep my home safe and my heart soft where it deserves to be soft. On the anniversary of the Café scene, I walked around the lake again. The swans slept with their necks tucked in. Ryan joined me with hot chocolate and said he had good news. A small foundation wanted to match donations to the First Light Fund for a month. He told me without fanfare. Like he was telling me the weather. I laughed and then I cried. They were the kind of tears that do not burn. The match would cover 2 more bus passes and 4 more used laptops, and a handful of calculators and more notebooks than a backpack could hold. It would not fix the past. It would feed the future. When we got home, I called Dad. He said the breakfast crowd was strong. He said a student from the high school had come in that morning with a voucher we had funded. She ordered pancakes and sat in a booth with a workbook and cried a little. He brought her extra syrup. He said she left her plate clean and her head up. I picked up my phone and opened the drawer where I keep my camera cables. The drawer with the card stayed shut. I sat at my table, set the phone to record and spoke to the camera. Not as a plea, not as a warning, as a story that might keep someone company. If you have ever faced a family betrayal, I said, I see you. If someone told you family is a word that can unlock your life, check the door twice. You can love people and still put a lock on what you earned. You can protect your peace without turning stone. The math of your life is yours. Make it add up for you. I told them about Dad's hands and the smell of onions and soap. I told them about the judge who sent restitution to a fund for kids with thin wallets and thick grit. I told them that poetic justice is not always a clap of thunder. Sometimes it is a person in a hairnet flipping eggs for strangers who will never know their name. Sometimes it is a letter that fails to sway a heart that has learned how to stand. I finished simply. Tell me your story in the comments, I said. Tell me what family means to you. If this helped, subscribe for more real stories. We may not choose where we start, but we get to choose who we become. I hit stop and set the phone down. Outside the lake was black glass. Inside, the herbs on my windowsill leaned toward the light. The door was locked. The room was mine. The future was honest work,